Mm. Okay, we live. So, hello everyone, welcome. My name is Alicia Brashay, and I'm here with my co-host Anna Harper. We're from Cosmic Gateway in conjunction with World Unity Week, and we are so delighted to be here with Judith Kusel. We're going to be having an amazing conversation with her. So, Judith is a soul reader, she's an author, she's an inspirational writer, and a speaker. And of course, you know, in my personal opinion, Judith, you literally are the physical embodiment of cosmic knowledge, of ancient cosmic wisdom, you know, from planetary bodies, from, you know, cosmology. And it's just a delight to have you here and see where we're going to go in this conversation. And thank everyone for joining us on the live. So Judith, welcome so much for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and welcome everybody who's watching this. I'm delighted that I'm interviewed from Australia. That is my first time that happens. And yeah, and Australia, of course, features in my book, Why I Was Born in Africa. And there's so many South Africans living in Australia now. So I think this was a great sort of migration to the east for South Africans. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, I'm a little taken aback because I did not realize that. Oh, that I feel quite excited and honored. Well, maybe can we start there? I know that you have written a few books. For those who don't know, and I highly recommend to connect with them because they are just massively jam-packed full of code and information and activations and remembrance. But maybe can you talk about that piece of where Australia features in that book and tell us a little bit about that, your book specifically and that part, and we'll start from there.
Yeah, the book I'm referring to is Why I Was Born in Africa, the unrecorded history of Elysium and the Lion Kingdom. And that actually started when my whole life was collapsing. I've always been librarian. And then I had an incident coming up where my whole carpet was pulled under me and my whole life collapsed. And at that stage, I actually asked myself, why the heck was I born in Africa? Because I'm a fifth generation South African German. My ancestors came from Germany to start mission in South Africa, the Hermannsburg mission. And as they came from Lower Saxony to actually open up the mission station here in South Africa, they were actually on their way to Zanzibar and to Ethiopia because of the Queen of Sheba. So the legend there, when they got stuck, when they actually got stopped in Zanzibar, and the Sultan of Zanzibar said, no, you can't go up the coast here, and you've got to go back. So they went back to Durban, and there they met with the Berlin missionaries. And then they said, well, why don't you start a mission under the Zulus here? And that's how my family actually came here to South Africa and in Africa. So as this all happened and the whole collapse came, and I just found myself, now what the heck am I doing here? I've always asked myself, what the heck am I doing on this planet? Anyway, and then through this whole awakening, I was first put in a museum where I was working with archives of a colonial history of, which was the British Empire, because we were much a British colony as you were. And with that, a lot of my own family history came in because they were involved in the Boer War and they were involved in the Zulu War. And then I was actually working with real soldiers who the British government shipped out to South Africa during the Iraq War and took them to the battlefields of the Zulu War and the Anglo-Boer War in South Africa. So through all of this, I was starting to suddenly open my psychic centers, which I've never done before. And because I came into such a conservative family, of missionaries, you know, these psychic abilities were never talked about. They were never ever acknowledged. So for me, I suddenly had openings where I suddenly saw the soldiers on the battlefields. And then I was actually told one day, well, the BBC is coming to make a documentary on the Battle of Talana. You will take them through that battle. You will have microphones strapped onto you, and you will tell the story as we go up the hill. Okay. This was a mountain to climb because the battle took part on up on the hill. And I mean, I was in total trauma because I was seeing this war scene as it happened. And the British were slaughtered that day by the Boers because the Boers, I mean, they were used to hunting animals and things like that. And they were sitting on top of the hill. And here the British had to eat breakfast, and they suddenly had the bombardment coming to them. And I was seeing all of this in technicolor detail. And the only thing that kept me sane was the officers of the British Army that were with me, and especially two of them, one was a woman and one was a man. And also what also happened is I had South African ex-soldiers with me who were in the Angola War. And I had also with me a psychic who actually saw the horses in the battle, you see, because they still used horses then. And the trauma the horses were going through. And then at the one stage, the British artillery were actually bombing their own people. It was such a battle that it was absolutely chaos. And I remember that the British soldier at that stage said to me, you know what is happening to you is what happens to us when we go into battle, because today we cannot see, you know, because they don't see the physical enemy, but we have to use our sixth sense. And then I suddenly realized, oh my goodness, yeah, this is what's happening to me. My psychic abilities are opening up, and I can now see, you know, what I couldn't see before. But through this all, I actually got help from my editor now, who's still Charlotte. Stephen, who is a photographer, who actually photographed us, and actually the camera that night when we were on top of the hill, because the Boer forces after the battle came at midnight to connect their wounded on the battlefield. And now every day, every time of the commemoration of the Talana battle, you can hear the horses coming up on top of the hill. You know, the face, of course, the ghosties or whatever they are. And we actually could hear them when we were sitting on top of the hill in the moonlight, and here you heard the horses coming up. And he said to me, you know, Judith, you need help. I said, yeah, I don't know what's happening to me. And then Jill came and she said to me, you know what, you need help. I said, yes, I do need help. She says, well, everything you're seeing is true. You must never doubt yourself, because what you are tuning into is your own abilities to see the far seeing, and you're tapping into that. And she said the soldiers are drawn to you because they're drawn to your light. And they want you to help them to be released from the battlefield. And I said, excuse me, I've never done that in my life. How the heck am I going to do it? And I said, how many are there? She said, 60 of them. I said, what? and of course they were all buried on the battlefield, you know, because the British always bury their soldiers where they die. You see, they don't take them back to their own home country. And I used to see the officers standing at these battle graveyards and actually crying. And then I said to them, what the heck is going on with you? Why you're crying here? And they said, they know what we went through, you see. Any case, so it happened that the curator of museum actually went overseas, and I was about in my office alone for about 2 months or so. And then it was quiet. It was a quiet season, and in the museum. And these officers and men actually came to my office in their other form. And I would ask them, because you must remember the British kept record of everything. So whoever died in the battle was recorded, you see, and their rank and their name was recorded. And then I actually asked him, I said, what's your name? What's your rank? Okay. And then I say, what is it? What is keeping you here? Why have you not released? And then and you know, the stories, I would then go into the archives and I would actually find their names and exactly as they told me. So I knew I was not imagining things. You see, I could back up whatever was happening to me. And mostly it was unfinished business, you see. You know, it was sweethearts that were left behind. It was family matters that were not resolved before they were. And then they wanted to see their loved ones, but now they were dead for about 100 years. I said, well, you know, you can't see them now. They're gone, you know. And so I helped each of them, you know, as they came in, as Jill had said. And then I never forget that, but one day, when I was actually coming, it was early morning, it was October, you know, when we went through the dry winter season and now the first spring rain came and you had all these wild flowers and the green grass sort of springing into form and being. I got out of my car and there was a shaft of sunlight coming after we had a bit of rain, you know, that time when the sun just bursts through. And I stood there and they all stood all around me and they saluted me.
Wow.
And then I knew they were all released. But this incident opened up my faculties because then I thought to myself, well, I'm getting insane here. I don't know what's happening to me. But I knew and then suddenly I started to see energy lines. I started to see the earth energy lines. I started to work with them. Things would happen to me. And as I was starting to work with the energy fields, I went to the Natal Drakensberg, which is right where my family farms are, right in the foothills of the Drakensberg and right in the Drakensberg. And I had the most amazing experiences where I started to connect with the San spirit. The San Bushmen were the only people that were in South Africa when the colonists arrived from overseas. You know, so the whole of more or less the whole Southern Africa was empty except for these Bushmen. And with that, they appeared to me and showed me their sacred places. And the sacred places were always where where was water, where there was a cave, a sacred cave, and where they actually put their paintings on. Now the shamans went into an altered state, and they would connect to the ancestors or the spirits or whatever it is that they were collecting it. They would get information from that, come back, and then they would paint this on the walls of the cave. So you have them all over South Africa where the shamans were. And with that, the whole story of Africa in its true form started to emerge from all of this, because I was starting to tap into the recorder, because all information that's ever been on Earth has been recorded in energy fields. You know, people always think that these primitive people, like you have the Aborigines in Australia and the songlines and so on, they said they were primitive because they did not have a written language. Excuse me. In the beginning, you did not need a written language and you did not need to speak. You communicated telepathically. And also, everything was recorded in energy fields. What the heck did you need writing for? And you know, you don't need it.
In comparison.
You don't need it. And also with that, I started to suddenly, you know, I was told, get out a map of Africa. I'm not getting out a map of Africa. I didn't even have an atlas. I mean, I couldn't use the library atlases, so I had to go buy myself an atlas. But in any case, by that time, I was not working in the library anymore because I resigned, because I was with everything that happened to me, and even death threats coming to me because it's all turned political and so on. I just knew I actually had a vision, because I was standing at the edge of a cliff, and I was actually shown thousands of people down in the valley below. And my higher guidance said, how long are you going to stand at the edge of this cliff and not have the guts to go and do the work that you are called to do now? And you need to jump off the cliff. Those people are waiting for you to finally do the work what you've come in to do. And then I was shown, how does an eagle learn to fly? And by its mother kicking it out of its nest, and then it's got to find its wings to fly.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next day I put in my resignation. And then I always knew that I had a book to write. And I literally got into my car and I said, okay, where do I need to start? So out comes the map of Africa for the atlas that I bought now. And they said, okay, now draw this line. So I drew this line from the 33-degree longitude line. I had no idea what I was doing, but I saw that it got right through Africa, you know. And thought, oh, this is interesting. And then I started to connect with the crystal pyramids that were under the sea. And one of them was the pyramid of a white flame. And so I was drawing pyramids, you know, sort of like on Africa and then finding it. And I had no idea. All I knew is that I had to go and find these pyramids. Wherever they are, I knew I had to find them. So I literally I said, okay, now where do I start now? You've got to find me a starting point. So I closed my eyes and I took a pencil and it landed actually right here in the area where I'm living now. Sort of like a bit down. And for myself, okay, I've never been there, but I'll go. Because, you know, with South Africa, we've got these wide open spaces and, you know, far distances. And I got here and it was like, oh, I was seeing, you know, exactly. I was picking up, you know, because what happened here is, you know, we had in the beginning when Elysium was, that's why there was just one single continent in the beginning. Because in the beginning, the inner earth, Agatha, and it does exist, by the way, it's the seventh dimensional, so we can't just see the people with our naked eyes. We can see them with our inner eyes. And that was the satellite of the intergalactic fleet. And then after many, many millions of years, well, Earth years, they decided to, because you see, if you have a certain evolutionary consciousness and know-how, you become a co-creator with the divine. So the scientists from the intergalactic councils had the abilities to actually create the outer crust of the earth. And as they did so, they also put all the energy lines in, you see. Mm-hmm. And actually that's recorded in Egypt because Thoth, the god Thoth, actually said that he puts those energy lines in. So they're in it, they see. And those are the song lines that the Aborigines talk about. And the San people in Africa knew exactly that as well. That's why they put the sacred centers where these energy lines all meet, you see. And that is where you'll find a vortex of spiraling energy that actually is created. So you can go, if you stand in those sacred places, go into altered states of being. You literally can span dimensions there and tap into those energy fields and bring recorded energy back, you see, because it's all recorded. And you see, and then, okay, now they put the autocross crust in and they said, okay, this is the first civilization on Earth. And we also, it was Elysium, it was one single continent. Now the geologists talk about the supercontinent and they're trying to put all the pieces together. And Africa holds that. But now on the eastern part of South Africa, a great catastrophe happened because Antarctica was still part of Africa. Australia was part of Africa. All the Indian islands that were the part of Africa, you see. And South America was actually part of North America. North America was part of Africa, North Africa, and on the other side. So you see, you've got one big continent. Now, and the geologists are piecing this together. You go and read what the geologists say, and they will tell you that. Because the oldest rock formations are found in South Africa, in a place called Barberton, where the gold mines are. And there they actually found that this goes back to at least 400 million years of Earth. 400 million years, okay. So you see the Earth, it recorded history. if you go and listen to what the geologists say, you will hear the truth. But don't go and listen to the archaeologists because they have their own stories that they spin. My brother is one of them, so I know all about that. Now, okay. So what happened is then a great Elysium was like an experiment, okay? They brought this plant species, they brought the animal species, they brought even humans, well, not humans because they were the scientists that were there, from all the galaxies and star systems, because we come from the 12 master galaxies. They were the first galaxies that were ever created in the first universe, okay? So this was an experiment. And then the scientists fell in love with the planet Earth, and they said to him, well, can we please stay here? And they went to the intergalactic councils, and the council says, yes, on one condition. You sign a contract that says you are taking part in an experiment. Now, that is very important for us to remember, because we as souls must always remember we are part of an experiment. Once you start realizing that, you don't take life so seriously. Because all of us actually choose to be on this planet and go through experiences here. But it's not the end all and be all of our soul, because our soul is infinite. This is just a finite experience. But what happened then is Elysium was like the age where you had these beautiful crystal pyramids. The Temple of a White Flame actually was the greatest of all of that. But they all connected to energy grids. So in other words, you had free power. You could at any time sort of tap into that free power. You could man your spacecraft with it. You could actually teleport with them wherever you wanted to be. You could bilocate. You could span dimension. You could go on interstellar travel. That's all there. You see, it's in the earth. You don't need to go and dig, like big holes in the earth or scrape the earth from all the oil or something. If you know how to use those energy grids, you literally have free power for everyone. And it's not that it has gone, it's left. It's still there, okay? So as I started doing this, I started to speak to the geologist about the coastline here, because, I was seeing that these crystal pyramids were under the sea and offshore from Africa right up to Madagascar. And then because the Egyptian pyramids, you must remember, are exactly on the same 33-degree longitude. But I was shown, you see, that they are much younger than the original ones that were there. So I was okay, they are a remnant, but they were built much later. So what happened to Africa? Why is Africa looking different now? And then the geologist said to me, well, a great catastrophe actually happened, because as the coastline of Africa is here, the land must tore off, and then this part of the landmass went underneath that and lifted it. So that's why in South Africa, you immediately climb mountains when you get to this from the sea level.
So much sense to me. Yeah, right. I have never. Wow.
And then they actually, when I started to see that, they showed me that Madagascar tore off, the Indian Islands tore off, and Australia actually fits very nicely in all of that, because Australia then tore off. So the eastern part of Australia used to be part of Africa. Now look at what the botanists tell you, okay? Because I researched this. I'm a librarian. I always want to know, if these things are imagined or whether I got it. So I started. And one day I was lucky, because I worked with botanists and with those from the oceans and so on. So I started asking them. They found species in the Salt River here, which is just here at my doorstep, that you only find in Australia.
Wow.
You find the baobab trees, which you only find in South Africa, in Madagascar, and Australia.
Wow.
You find certain fish species you only find here and in Australia, and nowhere else. Okay. So does that tell you something? Tells you this. Even like shells and you know those other squids and things you only find in Australia. You don't find them. So that shows you that all of this comes together at one stage.
Mm.
So
go out and get a biome tree now.
in any case, now I boggled your mind, but what happened there was actually that the wars of heavens actually started. And in my book, I actually goes why the wars of heaven started and who started it, okay, etc. And then the earth actually at that stage, there was terrible things that went on there because galaxies were destroyed, like Lyra was destroyed or partially destroyed. Like in this solar, now you've got to remember that everything in this universe is balanced. If you have got one thing here, you have the other thing there. You never have one without the other. You never have shadow without light. They always balance each other out. Now, what happened is that the planet between Mars and Jupiter blew itself up. Now, this is recorded in ancient script. If you go and dig deeper, in ancient mythology, this is recorded. The wars of heavens are also recorded. You will find it everywhere. If you start digging, you've got to dig a bit deep because it's not things that they will advertise anywhere. Now, they don't like advertising these things. Now, once you actually have it, you must remember this planet was putting pieces out. So that's where the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter comes from. Now you had pieces of this planet, which was on fire, suddenly bombarding the other planets in the solar system. So what can you imagine? Our counter system was on, your counter solar system was out of balance now too, because this whole thing was out of it. Earth was thrown right out of orbit. And the only thing that survived intact was the inner Earth. That's why they are in a much higher dimensional state, you see?
Making sense.
But Elysium was suddenly broken up into more than one continent where there were suddenly islands and things you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the story of Elysium. But then after the wars of heaven sort of like stabilized, okay, it was right. Orion and Sirius come very much with the Pleiades, come to the fore now in this whole thing. Because you must remember that of the 12 master galaxies, 3 were totally destroyed. Nothing remained of them. And then the others were like damaged or they were not quite doing. And the remnants sort of fled to Sirius and Orion and also Pleiades. So now you had the Lemurians, which I call them the lion people, because as they appeared to me, they were very, very tall. They had sort of like, they're not quite, they've got a sort of like a coppery skin, but then they have like their red hair is in a top knot. They've got reddish hair. Some of it is more sort of like aubanish, blondish type of hair. But, and they were very tall. Well, some of them were they were at least over 10 meters tall, whatever. So I knew because I got to get thinking of this. Anyway, and funnily, they have found remains of these giants in South Africa.
Really?
They have remains of it. Michael Tillinger goes into this. I won't go into his work, but where I was led to, South Africa, we've got the oldest stone circle in South Africa, which is at least 250,000 years old. Now, when I was led on my journey now with these crystal pyramids, I was told to go there. So I went there, and when I stood, the first time I actually got into that area, because if I go into energy fields, and those that go on tour with me will attest to me, to that, I sit in the bus and I start shaking because my body starts tuning into the energy fields of the earth. So I always know when I'm in an energy field because it's there. And I was actually, I was going to meet Michael, and And I stayed in one of the bed and breakfasts there, and I just went outside. And the first thing I saw was stones, sort of like walls, but they circle, and the geologists, the archaeologists say they kraals. Now, kraal is like a cattle den, that you build. And I looked at this and I thought to myself, well, this can't be a kraal because there's no opening. I mean, how the heck are the cattle going to jump over the wall? I mean, that's a bit silly, You've got a cattle climbing over the wall to get into an enclosure. And they like beehives, they like circles and circles and circles. Now, in South Africa, this goes on for kilometers, kilometers, and kilometers right into Zimbabwe, where the ruins of Zimbabwe are. If you look at them from the air, every one of these circles has got a different pattern, and it's sacred geometry, okay?
All right, yeah.
Yeah. Now, when I was in Kaapse, where the stone circle is, I first went with Michael, and there are standing stones there. And I remember we were there at the spring equinox, and Michael wanted me to go between these two. I said, I am not going there because if I go there, I'm going to disappear. I know that.
I believe that. Did you go close enough? I mean, what was the energy like?
Close enough. I mean, but I said I will not step in. I won't step in there. Yeah, it's impossible. I won't go there because I knew that if I stepped in that, I would just go disappear. I will just go and be resurrected or move in somewhere, a place like that. I just knew that.
You would have gone. Any idea?
But if you actually stand there and you can, it's really high on the Drakensberg escarpment. So you're right on top of the mountain there. You look right into the valley there where the sappy plantations are, these are the forestry. You can see the pyramids there, and there's exactly 7 pyramids there. But you can't get onto the sappy plantations, A, because it's foresters, B, because there's gold mines there. Now, there's ancient gold mines there because if you go onto this place, you can see that great catastrophes happened. I walked in there. I mean, for about, I was there for 2 weeks. I used to go walking there, and every time I saw something different there. It's just the most amazing place. But everything is melted. Like you have giant tortoises there. You have giant dinosaurs there, but everything is melted. It's like this whole scene is set in stone, like something terrible happened and everything has been made, sort of turned into stone. And I sat and told myself, what the heck has happened here? And they said this was Enki's beloved city. And then 2 brothers fought. And in this war that ensued, this whole place was just melted down, like with atomic warhead or whatever. Mm-hmm. Anyway, when I walked in this, the ladies at the hotel always said, oh, please be careful. You are walking alone. There's holes in the ground there. And I said, explored holes. They said, no, there are shafts there of gold mines that go right down into the earth. They don't know who dug them because they're so ancient. And they don't know the bottom of them. Now, when you have mine shafts go like this into the earth. They don't go like... And I remember that when I was a teenager, my father always loved taking us to all these sites that he always thought fascinating. And we were in Zululand, and exactly the same mine shafts were there. And there is gold there. In any case, so whoever mined gold there had technology that we do not have in current times. There's still gold mines there, but they are mined, modern mines. They're not this type of technology. And I was actually walking over them, and I was careful, I don't look at it. But I was like peering down one of them. I thought to myself, well, this goes on forever. I don't know where these things end up.
Does it go all or...
But in any case, so this, and now Michael has started to collect, like, because he's always sort of going around everywhere there and sort of researching and things. he's got a little museum there in Waterval, Werfen, or is it? Yeah, it's Waterval Werfen. And he actually found pieces of human bones there, but much larger than ours. And because of this catastrophe happened, there were a great flood as well. So these bones have actually been preserved perfectly because of the acid or something contents that's in the soil there, you know, with this flooding or whatever happened. And he actually one day was standing with this heart in his hand, and he thought, myself, well, this looks like a heart, but it's a big one. And a doctor stopped next to him and said, "Oh, you're Michael Tillinger, hello." He says, "You're holding a heart in your hand." and this is a heart of a giant, and it's got arteries and everything still preserved, absolutely 100% in it. Much larger than our human hearts are now.
How much bigger in comparison? I mean, I have seen Michael's work, and I've seen him talk about the fingers and the size and all that, but I haven't heard that part of the story with the human heart. Is it like double, triple? Like, this is fascinating.
Funny. You can actually see on YouTube, if you go on YouTube and ask Michael Pilling, he does show it there. And also, you know, parts of you know, arms and legs and things like that. Again, a great catastrophe must have happened. So these giants were obviously sort of like wiped out in an instant with the animals that were there. As I say, these giant tortoises and things that you don't see anymore. And I mean, they're giant. They're taller than I am.
How far back are you talking?
Well, if a stone circle, according to conservative estimates, is about 250,000 years old, I would take it a few million years back, you know, even more than that. Because if they say that place in South Africa is so many millions of years, then I presume that that would be the case. But the thing is, they're always putting the dates back now, because even the archaeologists are now realizing, you know, the timing is a bit wrong here, you know, because they're always finding artifacts that even go older than that. So they have to now also start stretching themselves and say, well, you know, our estimates are too you know, to thing. The thing is with science, sometimes they've got establishments, and they you know, they're scared to go out of that establishment because they know that their jobs are in jeopardies and things like that. So they are. But if you talk to them privately, they will tell you all sorts of stories they will never ever admit in public. So that's a different story. But all of this showed me that that after the Elysium is the people from Lyra came, and they were the master architects and engineers, you know, and they started rebuilding the whole of a civilization. And they very much also the ones that brought the hanging gardens, you know, we would all remember the hanging gardens of Babylon. But I was shown how their pyramids actually had like hanging gardens. And they were beautiful cities, and they were all designed in sacred geometry. And they all had water features with them, because you see, water is an energy conduit. So wherever you have the energy lines and the natural energy sources, you will find that. Now, Uluru is part of Elysium, and it's part of that ancient system. The whole of the western part of Australia is that. The other part is more Lemuria, you know, sort of a part of Lemuria, which rose later after it was sort of in the same framework as the Lion Kingdom, but a bit later.
And I was gonna that was actually going to be my next direct in, where does Lemuria sit in this history and in the story that you're sharing? So okay, it came. I thought so, but I just wanted to. Can we? I want to let you continue, because I am so mesmerized right now, and but I do want to talk about Lemuria and then, you know, into present day, because history and the true history of Earth and the cosmos is something that is so fascinating to me. But I do have to share something with you. So this happened just recently. You know how synchronicities guide you to a certain thing. I was going through a very deep healing process, going back just I mean, the last few months have been, I don't need to explain to you or the viewers, I'm sure we're all going through it collectively, but part of my experience was to go back and retrace my soul origins. And I was doing that because there was like trauma in the line. And I work in energy. I'm an energy practitioner. So I was kind of going through this process and talking about validation and things like that. And I was tracing and it was Lyra, and then it bounced. I can't remember exactly then I was like taken to Sirius, and then Orion, then Pleiades, and I was watching, and Arcturus, and I was watching this line and then into Earth, and it kept coming to me, and I literally then clicked on YouTube and I saw an interview that you had done with Todd, and I pressed play, and within very short minutes, because it was halfway through, I'd started watching it and not finished, and you said the exact thing, and I was in awe. I was like, oh my goodness, you are literally speaking what I've just experienced through a soul journeying. So I just wanted to put that in and just say how impactful your work is and how it reaches people, and just you are doing the validation for people like myself, and I know I can speak on behalf of Anna, even though I don't want to. And that's just one story in when you had your validation, when you were sharing about the soldiers and the archives, that validation, even though we don't really need it, but sometimes it's so validating. So I just wanted to share that, but I don't want to interrupt either because I'm so enthralled in this. So did you want to jump? Would you be able to talk a little bit about Lemuria?
Yeah.
Would that be okay?
Lemuria,
Yeah.
Lemuria was what we have to know. Remember, there's just still one part but when the Lion Kingdom also was destroyed, and it was because two twin brothers actually fought each other, and then that was like an atomic warfare, and then more continents were made. Now, Avalon, which we remember as Avalon, and always people think about it as King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. That was a myth that later was created on the remembrance of the original Avalon, because where Ireland is now, that was part of North America, and Britain was part of Europe. So, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was called to France in 2016, I had to open up those energy lines, and in this whole story, that is the story of Avalon that comes out, and they were the wizards. Okay, like Merlin, we all remember Merlin, and the real Druidic history comes from Avalon, and they were actually a matriarchal society. And they were very, very, very masterful manifestations, and they also used the energy fields of the earth in order and to build the stone circles and things. And if they even went into France, you've got Karnak, and then you got in Versailles. I had to open up a huge one of those. And interestingly, that like the Chartres Cathedral was built right over one of the most ancient spiraling energy sites that you can get on. So you go into that church and you stand in that labyrinth, this whole energy comes through. But and Britain is part of it, Scotland is part of it, Ireland is part of it. But this is a very, very much that manifestation that you can, if you know how to, if you stand your mastery, you can literally co-create anything that you wish. And that is what they had. But then they were invaded, by brutal people who had actually come to Earth from Mars. And they actually they were brutally, they didn't know how to defend themselves because they never had war. Suddenly you're confronted with war, and your ethics also come in because you're not used to killing people, with whatever you were doing. So that's the whole history of it. But when Avalon was in that part of the fall, Lemuria had already started rising. But Lemuria was a very special experiment of androgyny on the planet. So they were male and female in one single embodiment. Very beautiful, peaceful race. highly intelligent, highly evolved. They were like master creators in their own way. They had the ability to co-create on their own. They didn't need a partner to do that because they could basically sort of envision, they would connect. They would say, okay, what type of soul do I wish to bring into Earth? Okay. That, to me, that's highly evolved because most parents don't think about what type of soul they would like to attract, before they even have a baby, which is something human beings will start to remember how to do in the new Earth. And then also, are you ready for the child? What type of life would you give that child? Would you have time for it? Would you love it, unconditionally, that type of thing? And then they would actually sort of envision, this, and then connect with the soul. Okay. And then the soul, and they would agree to say, I bring you into incarnation. And then they would sort of like bring a seed of that thought of what they had and put that into a type of an incubator. And then from that would sprout, the seed would sprout the baby, but it was held in this incubator the whole time. And so it had no trauma. It was greatly loved. There was no trauma at birth. It was literally like an egg that would just break open and the child would be perfectly formed without any trauma, without any pain. And I find that so beautiful because, the more I work with people, the more I realize how much pain is associated with birth. And also with the separation from the mother. And sometimes, some things happen at birth, that you're not even aware of. And you might actually carry that trauma into your life, without you knowing it, without being aware of it. Now, the Lemurians were actually loved in the highest degree. That's what they were, loving, gentle people, very much at one with nature. When they created anything, it was in nature and with nature. They worked with the elementals in a harmonic way. They actually created their well, not really cities, but more abodes that were sort of flowing into nature. So you had like the features and everything would be like you are in nature. I was given a vision last year where this was so beautifully demonstrated because the western part of America was actually part of Lemuria. Okay, now think of the Pacific Islands and Australia coming in on the Pacific side there or whatever. Okay, so that's part of a continent that was there. Okay, that's Lemuria. Now, and parts of South America still belong to that, like the Easter Islands and that type of thing. And there's actually a huge landmass that is sunk under the sea there, this offshore. There, right? Anyway, they were a very gentle and highly evolved people who would literally not hurt a fly, literally, because they were in harmony with nature, they were in harmony with Mother Earth, and they also had a very, very high connection to the intergalactic councils and interstellar travel and so on. So they were actually like cosmic beings that were just having this sort of like sojourn on Earth or experience of Earth in their own way. But the great tragedy of that is that Atlantis then rose. Okay, Atlantis was where the Atlantic Ocean now is. That's why it's called the Atlantic Ocean. And in that, but they were islands. There were 7 islands or so, but they're not islands like we think, a little island. They're more like Australia, big ones. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. So anyway, the Atlanteans were now, after the fall of Avalon, into the 5th. You must remember they all were in the 7th dimension. So if you would look at them today, you won't be able to see them because they would appear see-through. Because you must remember, the higher your vibrational frequency is, the lighter your body becomes. So you can't see them with your physical eyes. Now Atlantis was here in the 5th. And Atlantis had their golden age. Okay. But and they were highly evolved in that age of the golden age. But what happened in Atlantis is the same old species that actually started the wars of heaven started to infiltrate the minds of human beings. And they took over control of the mind. See? And they divorced the mind from the heart. And they started to enslave the whole population of Atlantis, and they actually put control boxes into the Atlantean populations because they were actually planted here in the cranium area. I have removed them from quite a few people. And you see, if you block your creating here, you block your higher transmitter channels. And what happens is you start bringing alienation and separation into being. You see, separation from the divine and all the cosmos and the whole universe, separation from others, and separation from yourself. That's when the patriarchy took over. Because you see the feminine, beautiful, intuitive side, the loving side, and we even shut that down within themselves. Because you must remember this part here now is cut off from that part. So what happens? You cause division, you cause separation there. Now, they looked at Lemuria and they thought, now wait a minute, we want Lemuria because you see they are in a higher civilization. They seem to have more than us. So now how can we now get to these Lemurians, you see? So one of the high priests devised a plan. And he said, okay, if we can convince the Lemurians that there's something wrong with them, doesn't that sound familiar? If we can actually convince them there's something wrong with them because they are androgynous, remember, the Atlanteans were male and female, then we will actually sow the seed of discontent, you see? Doesn't this sound familiar? You know that story of Adam and Eve and the fall? Yeah, you know, did God say that, you know? Okay. So they started to convince the Lemurians they were actually sort of losing out on something. And what is that? The union between a man and a female and the sexual energy, of course. You see? Because the Lemurians couldn't mate like the Atlanteans did. And the Lemurians actually fell for it. And they said, oh my goodness, you know, the divine created something. They miscreated us because we can't mate, you know, like the Atlanteans are. There must be something that is very exciting in that, you know, that we are missing out on. And, you know, immediately sow seed of discontent, it starts growing. And then what happened was this same old guy that actually got this plan going, he invented a machine, literally a machine, where you could split the androgynous body into two halves, okay? The male and a female. And so some Lemurians volunteered to go through this. But they only found that once they were actually cut in half, they couldn't get back together again, no matter how much they tried. And what is the greatest pain of the human race today is that we're all searching for the other half of us, and we never seem to find the perfect fit. Because now this half suddenly realized, you know, once we actually had sexual intercourse, it wasn't such a wonderful thing as we had thought it was. Okay. And we suddenly see, you know, all the things we didn't like about the other one. And of course, you know, so it goes on and on and on. So you start creating a history of pain and suffering. And once they actually broke the Muslim, not all the Lemurians, there were lots of Lemurians that did not do that. They refused. They actually withdrew into a much higher dimensional state eventually. You know, they just said, no, we're not going to partake in this experiment, thank you. So they withdrew. They either went home to their home galaxy or they withdrew into their higher state. If they're in higher dimensional state, they're still on Earth because there are many dimensions on Earth simultaneously. But they just won't interact with people, you know, unless the people can tune into them, you see. The Aborigines know that. That's why with their sacred sites, they actually go and talk to these beings, because those beings are just as real as you and me, you know. This
Absolutely.
physicality is just an illusion. It
Mm.
actually keeps us prisoner in a lot of ways, because when a lot of people believe that this physicality is all there is, the end to be, it's not. It's not even a fraction of what is true. The greatest things that actually live and are being are invisible, they're not visible. But that broke the Lemurians, because the Atlanteans then put them into war and destroyed them in the end and enslaved them.
Mm.
So the whole woe of Lemuria was a tragic that they fell for the Atlanteans' lies and then had themselves separated and enslaved.
Mm.
So that basically was the fall of Lemuria. But then Atlantis, you see, what you do unto others, you do unto yourself. You can never get past that law, you see. You go and destroy somebody else, you destroy yourself. There's no way you can get away from it. It might take a few lifetimes, but it comes back to you.
Yeah.
And of course, the same old faction that took over Atlantis now started to want to destroy everybody else. And I mean, the high priesthood of Atlantis actually stood firm. They said, you're not going to get us, finish in. And they started to sort of, they actually foresaw the flood happen. They foresaw that these people would destroy Atlantis. So they started to actually sort of, the highest of them, like Thoth, the was high priest, like other ones, like in Hawaii, you had Hermes, who was a high priest, and he started the kahunas there. So all these people sort of like fractions off on places on earth where they knew that if the floods come, they will be all right. And they actually kept the light steady for humanity. So that when Atlantis started destroying themselves, and they again used atomic weapons, they nearly destroyed the earth. And then the Intergalactic Council says, no, listen, this is now too much of a muchness. And that is when the comets and the asteroids started to also like bombard the earth. And the whole civilization was literally wiped out. But it was these pockets of enlightened people that actually held the light steady. And a lot of them went underground into underground cities and underground tunnels, and then emerged when they could, to bring the light back to humanity. Because you must remember, humanity, the survivors then, and those odd pockets on Earth were basically like Stone Age people. That's why they did exist. I mean, it's not that they didn't exist, but they had to find a new way of life after everything was destroyed around them. And then these people came and taught them agriculture, and they taught them civilization from all scratch again. So that's basically the history of the Earth.
I'm lost for words right now because coming on, I mean, we didn't plan anything. We were just like, let's see where this conversation goes. And you've literally touched on every part of my favorite topic of human history, of how the connection. And I think why that's so important, and I'm so thrilled that you would share that with us this evening or this morning for you. Because I truly believe that to understand where we're heading now on Earth as a humanity, we have to understand the true nature and the true history of Earth to understand where we're coming back around, and also what we're healing in that process to be able to get to, the future that we're moving into. Can you, now that we've sort of like got the backstory, and I don't want to keep you too long, but I do want to keep going because I do have a couple of questions. Well, I have 10,000 questions, but we don't have time for that. Would you like to give your perspective of where we're currently at right now on Earth, and then maybe a snippet into your perspective of where we're heading in the next months, years, not really beyond that, because time is, it's a funny.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, no. I said time's a funny thing, but just your perspective of where we're at now and where we're headed is probably a better way to say that.
We're in the greatest shift back to our truth. Okay. Because since the 5th of July last year, the old Earth does not exist anymore except in the holographic form. And the new Earth is here. And it comes through so pertinently in my soul readings. You're standing now before a choice. The old Earth is disintegrating. Do you want to remain in the old earth? Do you want to repeat the same old pain, the same old suffering, the same old stories, the same old unforgiveness, the same old shame and blame and guilt? You know, you are the one. You know, the thing is, the more you point those fingers, the others point back at you, because what you see in others is present within yourself. We're getting back to the stage of unconditional love and oneness and unity. We are all one. We are one entity. And we had this on this planet. Look at Lemuria, look at Elysium. It was there. Not that it's not within us. We all remember it. Within us is this great void. We want to go back to the original state of being. The original state of being is oneness and unity. And we are one great tribe. We are one great of rainbow people. There's not one of us that is not lovable. We are all love in our greatest and truthful entry. But now we have the opportunity to really rise into it, to raise our vibration, to raise our energy field, to become at one with the divine again, with all of life and all of being, and one with ourselves and others. But the thing is, the kingdom of heaven is within you. You cannot create that oneness outside yourself if you're not at one with yourself, inside yourself. That's the greatest truth of all being. The kingdom of heaven is found within you, the oneness with the divine. Once you become so divine and you actually experience omnipresence, you radiate this forth and you welcome everybody into your circle. And that includes Mother Earth, that includes all animals, all creatures, all living people, because, you know, rocks are living beings.
Well, if you just
Grass is a living being.
Me and my father were talking about that this morning on our walk. He just out of nowhere was talking about rocks have consciousness, and we were talking. Oh, synchronicity. Sorry. Yeah.
Water has consciousness. It has consciousness. Everything around you is alive. There is nothing that is not alive and conscious and has not a soul. You know, it's the Great Spirit is in everything, because everything that's created was created by one creative source. And there's nothing under the great central sun that has not been created from the one source and is part of that source. Now, you must remember you've got a source that is physical and a source that's non-physical, and both balance each other out and come into oneness and unity. Just because you can't see it with your physical eye doesn't mean it does not exist.
So, have you got questions?
I did have a question, actually. So, going back to Lemuria just really quickly, yes, what I've learned is it was a matriarchal civilization. And I think, Alicia, it was, yeah. So apparently in Lemuria, there was, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, a woman could marry more than one man.
Oh.
What's the word? Polyamorous, I guess.
Oh, I know where you're going now.
To get that clarified, I thought we the one and only.
It happened. You must remember that when civilizations died, you know, you had to populate, you know, the thing, and then eventually it became that you needed to also spread the genes, you know, whatever. So on happened. So that's where this whole polygamy came in. And it's not to say that it doesn't work. I mean, it's something it does work. You know, if you have to survive in some or other, you will survive in that way. And there are many of those like, you know, the old Britain and so on. And if you look at the old laws in Europe, because I went into it, I wanted to know where marriage comes from. You know, it was just, you know, I always ask these questions and I'd say, well, I want answers. Where does it come from? I actually started to research it. And in Europe, people did not get married. The matriarchy still reigned in Europe before all this rest came. And the woman actually chose the man and not the other way around. And if she saw him was fit and he was able, you know, to give the best tribe into the tribe, that's when she chose him. You see, type of thing. When the church took over, what happened is, you know, the kings also had like lots of wives because it was just the custom of the time or whatever. And a lot of them, that actually the queen ruled and not the king. It's mixed in all societies. If the more you actually looked at it, every society and every tribe had their own type of rules, this or prevented them. But in any case, the church came, and actually what happened is the king now had sons from different wives, you see. And what happened is then they all started fighting over the crown. So the church said, well, listen, this is nonsense. Okay, from now on, you shall have one wife and she shall be the queen. And then that is it. Her children will get the crown, you see. And then when the kings had that enforced upon them, because they tried to argue with the Pope, and most of the time, the Pope withheld something from them or whatever. I don't know what stories they spun, but they did spun. What happened is then they said, well, if we have to do it, then you will have to do it too. So they enforced it onto all the other people, you see there. And if you actually start to look at it, where do the greatest fights come when people start divorcing? It's other property, because that is exactly why marriage contracts were. It was dowry. People, like women, were sold into marriages because of the properties that they owned, etc., you see?
Mm-hmm.
So woman became seen as a type of possession, and I mean, lots of women still act that way, they actually sell themselves to the men. I mean, it's still going on. It's just not so obvious, but it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
So you see, these are all things where we have to start to learn, because in actual fact, love does not own anybody. You can't ever own another soul. It's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible to own another soul. And the thing is, if you give the other freedom to be, they will always return to you because they love you, not for anything else.
Mm-hmm. I know that.
And that doesn't.
Oh, sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but I was going to say, I know that divine partnership or twin flames has been a big part of your work, and you write extensively about that and the transformation and the change that has happened. And I know that has been probably a big catalyst in your journey, I imagine. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when you were talking about Lemuria and the androgynous beings that were being split, is that what we're speaking about here, is the splitting of the soul and then trying to find the other part and coming back together? Is that one fraction of it? I know it probably goes a lot higher than that.
It's true for the Lemurian souls, but the other souls not.
Yeah.
And you must remember that something that comes very, very much in my readings is that the twin flames of everybody has not incarnated. If you are a certain highly evolved soul, now you must remember that so many highly evolved souls are now incarnated because they're helping the shift through, you see.
Mm-hmm.
The other half sits somewhere on their home galaxy and is still continuing the world and is holding the space for them. Now that's true love, huh? Mm-hmm. This one knows what you're going through while you are on earth. They love you so much that they hold the space for you day and night. They're always there to guide you and to love you through it. So is anybody ever left an orphan? No. You always have your support systems in place, okay? Day and night. You're never left without them. Now, I had the experience with my twin flame, but in the end, the twin flame decided that's not his path with me. And at that stage, it did hurt me very much. But I say now, thank heavens it happened. Because it also taught me that I've got to start standing in my own light. When other lifetimes I allowed him to overshadow me. You see, patriarchy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I gave my power away. But in this lifetime, I'm finally starting to learn to stand in my own full power. As a whole being. And interestingly, the other day, I was actually told pertinently that as you go into the new earth and you actually balance your male and female out within yourself, you are finally ready for your divine complement. Because then you are whole and complete and not needy in any way. Because you're standing in the beauty and the full power of your soul as you in truth are. Now, what can be more beautiful than that?
Stunning. Something comes to mind, and just how it interconnects. So in the work that I do, I work in divine partnership, and not the same work as you do, and I will get you to talk about that a little bit in depth before we wrap up, but I like to observe as well, and through conversations that we had last year and how this connects in to what you said about in July of 2020 and what happened, we both reflect and said something massive happened around May to July, that then there was this splitting or breaking away. And in that time, I observed so many people walk away or split or separate or make a decision not to pursue a twin flame journey anymore, and walk on a different. There was a definite ripple effect that happened within the collective at that moment. Is that something that you have seen in your work? Yeah.
Because it's meant to happen. Because the old stories do not work anymore. The old stories do not work anymore. We now have to create something totally new. And we have to do it from the highest point that we can, embracing our full divinity and our full empowerment as soul. That's the beauty of this lesson.
And can you just talk a little bit about what is on that other side when you're talking about entering into new earth and holding that balance, and then I think you use the word divine complement, and I have heard that terminology in session before, so I find that fascinating. Can you just talk about that just a little bit?
What I was told a few months ago when I was asking exactly the same question, because I was told about the divine complement of myself, what the heck is this now? And, it's something new. So I said, okay, now what is this? And at that stage, I in the last few months, I have gone through transformations like I've never had in my life before. I mean, I thought that before, and all the pieces sort of like have come up, and I've gone through all these energetic clearances and clearing everything and leaving everything behind, forgiving and the shame and blame and guilt and whatever you talk with. I've walked through it. But you see, every time you release something, you become lighter, you become brighter, you become more yourself. You stand and you love yourself the way you know. If you can't love yourself to the deepest shadow and the highest light, you cannot love anybody else to that extent. You see? And it has to come inside yourself. Nobody else can fix you. You've got to do it yourself. And through this all working through, I started to experience omnipresence in the highest degree, and I still do it. And when you experience omnipresence, everything is quiet. You're totally quiet. You are just held in this energy that goes beyond words. You are lifted into highest dimensional state where the truth of your soul is, because your soul is that. Okay. There is just wholeness and unity. There is nothing missing. You are that. You embrace your divine self, your true daughtership of God, because you are a true goddess in your own right, a true God in your own right. We just forgotten that. Okay. And then I was actually said that you need to raise your frequency band and your consciousness to that level of a seventh dimensional state again, like you were in the beginning when you came to Earth. And in that state, the one who perfectly matches you in that state can finally reconnect with you in that state. So what happens is your relationships will be soul to soul. It will be a merger of soul, which is something completely different from the twin flame. This is something that's divinely orchestrated. And it will be a union of total wholeness within the holiness of the sacred fires. And what we believe the physical thing now in union will disappear, because the union will be in a different type of frequency band, in a different type of state that we cannot with our little minds here understand at this moment. But when I was shown this, I felt such joy. It was like a big homecoming within myself. And I thought, aha, that is what we are searching for all our lives, because our soul remembers this, not only from this planet, but from our truthful soul, you see.
Oh my
And it's
goodness.
interesting because before I go to sleep at night, I always say where I want to go. You know, if I want to learn something, then I say, can I go, you know, to my ascended masters and go and learn there? Because, you know, and that night I actually said, I just want to experience love in the deepest and most profounded way. And it's so funny, before I was going to sleep, my whole soul family was there welcoming me.
Oh.
Okay, they're all there.
Oh my goodness, that's so strange. Well, Judith, I just can't leave you out there. What a note to end on. But before we wrap up, I just want to ask you, is there anything that you're working on specifically, or any upcoming, you know, webinars or events, or anything that people can connect with you for? And of course, talk a little bit about the work that you do in your sessions and the soul readings. And what I will do is put in the comments section below, and also in the description, of how people can connect with you and your work, because I do highly recommend it.
Yeah, well, my soul readings are, you know, sort of ongoing. I do the, you know, even for children now and young adults, because that's my last, since January, I felt such a call to help the children and the young children, because they need help. Now, these are souls that have no history of this planet. They have no karma, they have no history of this planet. And that is we have to help these children. Please help them. I just did one yesterday for a 15-year-old, and the mother just came back to me. Wow, she said, this is something this child will have for the rest of her life. It will be like a guiding post for her for the rest of her life. And I've done them for babies. Actually, my first one was an Australian father. He got married and he said, you know, my wife is pregnant. Can I have a reading for the baby the minute it's born? I said, yes, sure. And I did. He's actually got two of them. And he's the most enlightened father that I've ever come across. You know, he said it helped them so much to understand the baby from the beginning and their journey in life. And in ancient times, they used to do it, you see. And also, I know that my soul readings, they're very deep in, and they trigger keys and codes within the soul. They will trigger that memory bank that needs to be awakened now, especially at this time, so you can step into your God and goddesshood. And then on the 5th of July, I have a webinar specifically about the marriage of the male and female within. And I'm going to talk about this in a great sense so that you can understand what is going to happen now. Because this enables us to go into the higher dimensional state that we are, in the true androgyny that we are. You see, there's Lemuria coming into wholeness again. And that's also applicable for the souls that always be male and female, or whatever it was. You see, so that we can get into wholeness again, so that we can prepare for that ultimate state of oneness that we are all desiring deep within ourselves. So that is what I'm going to do in that webinar now. And you can book it on my, it's called Higher Healing Webinars. So then you can go to courses on my website and go to then to the webinar and Higher Healing Webinars. And this year I'm being called to do great energy work with the white flame. I did because you see the temple of a white flame that has become reawakened now in the most amazing sense. So I'm very excited about this, because this is opening planetary grids and planetary energies again that we haven't had access to for billions of years. So things are happening. Boy, things are happening. I get excited about it, because I think to myself, you know, all of our souls have worked through so many lifetimes. You know, a lot of us were persecuted. We lost our lives because we held the light steady. Now this is all coming. All that we worked for ever before is now coming into form and being. I mean, what can be more of a gift than that?
There's nothing else. That is the greatest gift you can ever receive and witness and experience. So, oh, my heart is so filled with joy right now having this time with you. It's been precious. It's just been joyful. It's been full of love and information and codes. Thank you so much, Judith. And I will, just thank you everyone for watching. I hope that you've gained so much, as much as I have from this conversation, and of course encourage you to connect with Judith and her work. I will put all the links to her website and social media and connect with her there, and just endless amounts of gratitude and love for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Fatman. And I'm so proud of you girls because you're holding the light steady where you are and through the whole world. And what a wonderful opportunity to take part in the Unity Consciousness Week, because it's so close to my heart. Thank you so much. I love you very much. Thank you. It was with great love that I say, and thank you, and bless everybody. Thank you for the love that you in truth are. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you.
Thank you.